The phone rang at 3:47 a.m., shattering the silence of my Brooklyn studio apartment like a gunshot through glass. I jerked awake, my heart hammering against my ribs, disoriented in the darkness. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. Nothing good ever came from calls at this hour. But rent was 3 weeks overdue, and as a freelance translator in New York City, you learned quickly that you couldn't afford to be picky about when work found you. I fumbled for my phone on the nightstand, squinting at the screen. Unknown number, of course. Hello? My voice was rough with sleep. Miss Petrov? The voice on the other end was male, calm, with a faint accent I couldn't immediately place. Russian, maybe, but smoothed by years of speaking English. I apologize for the late hour. My employer requires the services of a translator, immediately. I sat up, pushing my dark hair out of my face. It's almost 4 a.m. Can't this wait until... No. The word was polite, but absolute. My employer is willing to pay $5,000 for tonight's work, cash. The assignment should take no more than 3 hours. $5,000? My breath caught. That was more than I usually made in a month. Enough to cover rent, utilities, and maybe even buy groceries that weren't ramen noodles. What languages? I asked, my mind already calculating risks versus rewards. Russian and Italian. I understand you are fluent in both, as well as English. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the October air seeping through my poorly insulated windows. How did they know that? My professional profile listed my language skills, sure, but something about the way he said it, the certainty in his voice, suggested they'd done more than a simple Google search. How did you get my number? Does it matter? There was a hint of amusement in his tone. A car is waiting outside your building, black SUV. The driver will bring you to the location. You will be returned home safely once the work is complete. I stood and moved to my window, pulling back the thin curtain. Sure enough, a black SUV idled at the curb, exhaust rising like smoke in the pre-dawn darkness. No license plate visible from this angle, tinted windows that revealed nothing. Every instinct I had screamed that this was dangerous, that I should hang up, maybe call the police. But $5,000? And something else, something I was less proud of, curiosity. In my 3 years as a translator, I'd worked for businessmen, lawyers, even a celebrity's entourage once, but this felt different. This felt like stepping into a world I'd only glimpsed in movies. What kind of meeting requires a translator at 4 a.m? The kind where discretion is paramount. Ms. Petrov, I need an answer. My employer doesn't appreciate waiting. I should have said no. Should have hung up and buried myself back under my covers and pretended this call never happened. Instead, I heard myself say, "Give me 10 minutes to get dressed." "You have 5. The line went dead. I stared at my phone for 3 precious seconds, then moved. I pulled on black jeans, a simple charcoal sweater, and my most comfortable boots. No jewelry, minimal makeup, hair pulled into a low ponytail. Professional, but unremarkable. I grabbed my bag, checked that my phone was charged, and paused at the door. This was insane. This was potentially the stupidest decision I'd ever made. But I opened the door anyway, and walked down the 3 flights of stairs to the street. The SUV's rear door opened as I approached, revealing a man in a dark suit. He was enormous, easily 6'5", with a shaved head and the kind of build that suggested he spent more time in the gym than anywhere else. His eyes were hidden behind sunglasses, despite the darkness, which should have been comical, but somehow wasn't. Miss Petrov. It wasn't a question. He gestured to the interior of the vehicle. Please. I climbed in, and he closed the door behind me with a solid thunk that sounded disturbingly final. The interior smelled of leather and something expensive and woody. Cologne, maybe. The windows were so heavily tinted that I could barely see outside. A privacy screen separated me from the driver. We drove in silence. I tried to track our route, but after the first few turns, I lost orientation. We seemed to be heading towards Manhattan, then veered off in a direction I couldn't identify. 20 minutes passed, then 30. I checked my phone. No signal. Of course not. Finally, the SUV slowed and pulled into what looked like an industrial area, warehouses and shipping containers stacked like building blocks against the night sky. We stopped in front of a nondescript building, 3 stories of concrete and steel with windows dark and empty. The door opened. The man in sunglasses gestured for me to exit. "Where are we?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "Where you need to be." Helpful. He led me through a side entrance, down a corridor lit by harsh fluorescent lights that flickered intermittently, and finally to a heavy metal door. He knocked twice, paused, then knocked 3 more times in quick succession. A code. The door opened. The room beyond was surprisingly elegant, a stark contrast to the industrial exterior. Hardwood floors, expensive furniture, artwork on the walls that my trained eye recognized as originals. A conference table dominated the center of the space, surrounded by leather chairs. And seated at that table were 6 men, all of whom turned to look at me as I entered. 5 of them were strangers, well-dressed, ranging in age from 30s to 60s, with the kind of contained violence in their postures that suggested they were dangerous even in stillness. But the 6th man who captured my attention, who made my breath catch in a way that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with something far more complicated. He sat at the head of the table, and even seated, I could tell he was tall, well over 6 feet. Dark hair swept back from a face that belonged on a Renaissance sculpture. Sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, and eyes the color of smoke and steel. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, no tie, the top button of his white shirt undone. He couldn't have been much older than 35, but there was an authority in his bearing that made age irrelevant. When he looked at me, I felt it like a physical touch, those gray eyes assessing, calculating, seeing far more than I wanted to reveal. "Miss Petrov." He stood, and the movement was fluid, controlled, predatory. His accent was more pronounced than the man who'd called me, unmistakably Russian but refined by years of speaking English. "Miss Petrov, thank you for coming on such short notice. I am Damian Volkov." The name meant nothing to me then. I would learn later that Damian Volkov was a ghost in the criminal underworld, a man whose name was whispered but never spoken out loud, whose empire spanned from Moscow to Milan to Manhattan, a man who brokered deals between the Russian Bratva and the Italian Cosa Nostra, who spoke both languages fluently but trusted no one to translate the nuances of his negotiations. Until now. "Mr. Volkov." I moved further into the room, hyper-aware of the door closing behind me, of the man in sunglasses taking up position beside it. "I was told you needed a translator." "I do." He gestured to the men at the table. "Gentlemen, this is Miss Petrov. She will be facilitating our conversation this evening." One of the men, older, with silver hair and the kind of face that had seen too much sun and violence, spoke in rapid Italian. I caught enough to understand he was questioning my presence, my trustworthiness. Damian's response was in perfect Italian, smooth and unbothered, but he glanced at me. "He wants to know if you can be trusted to keep tonight's discussion confidential." "I can," I said, then repeated it in Italian, addressing the silver-haired man directly. "Everything I hear in this room stays in this room. That's part of my professional ethics." The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He said something else in Italian, too quick for me to catch entirely, but the word Bella was clear enough, and the way his gaze traveled over my body made my skin crawl. Damian's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air, a sudden drop in temperature. He replied in Italian, his tone pleasant, but with an edge that could cut glass. Then he switched to English, his eyes on mine. "Mr. Rossini appreciates beauty in all its forms. I've assured him that you're here solely in a professional capacity." Professional capacity. Right. Except that the way Damian was looking at me suggested that the lines of professionalism were already blurring, at least in his mind. Shall we begin? Damian returned to his seat, gesturing for me to take the empty chair beside him. I sat, acutely aware of his presence, of the faint scent of his cologne, something with notes of bergamot and leather. The table was set with glasses of vodka, because of course it was, and several folders that I suspected contained information I very much did not want to know about. For the next 2 hours, I translated. The conversation was ostensibly about a business merger, the acquisition of shipping routes and warehouse facilities. But the subtext was clear to anyone with half a brain. This was about drug trafficking, about territory, about the uneasy alliance between Russian and Italian organized crime in New York. I kept my face neutral, my voice steady, translating word for word without commentary. This was what I'd been hired for. This was what $5,000 bought, my skill and my silence. But as the meeting progressed, I began to notice things. The way one of the younger Italian men, dark-haired and handsome in a sharp-featured way, kept glancing at Damian with barely concealed hostility. The way Rossini's smile grew thinner each time Damian spoke. The tension that coiled tighter with each passing minute. Something was wrong. This wasn't just a business meeting. This was a powder keg, and I was sitting right next to the fuse. It happened so fast I almost didn't process it. The dark-haired young man stood abruptly, his hand moving inside his jacket. I saw the glint of metal, registered what was happening half a second before anyone else did. Gun! The word tore from my throat in English, instinctive, useless. Damian moved faster than should have been possible for a man his size. His hand shot out, grabbed my arm, and yanked me sideways off my chair. I hit the floor hard, the breath knocked from my lungs. And then the world exploded into violence. Gunshots. Not the clean pops from movies, but deafening cracks that made my ears ring. Shouting in Russian and Italian, the table overturned, wood splintering, the sound of bodies hitting the floor. Damian's body covered mine, heavy and solid, shielding me from I didn't even know what. His hand pressed my head down, his voice in my ear speaking rapid Russian that I barely understood through the adrenaline and terror. Then silence. Horrible, ringing silence. Damian lifted himself slightly, looking around, and I risked turning my head. The dark-haired young man lay crumpled 5 feet away, blood pooling beneath him, his eyes staring at nothing. 2 other men were down, one Russian, one Italian. The man in sunglasses stood near the door, gun still raised, professional and unbothered. Rossini and the remaining men had their hands raised, faces pale. "Everybody calm," he said, English deliberately simplified, perhaps for my benefit. He looked down at me, his gray eyes intense. "Are you hurt?" I shook my head, unable to speak. "Good." He stood, pulling me up with him, keeping his body between me and the others. He spoke in Italian, his voice hard and cold, words I translated automatically in my head. This was an act of disrespect, an act of war, but I am a reasonable man. Rossini, take your people and leave. We will discuss reparations later. Rossini started to argue, then thought better of it. He gestured to his men, and they hurried from the room, leaving the bodies behind. When the door closed, Damian finally released me. I staggered backward, my legs unsteady, staring at the carnage. 3 men dead. Just like that. And I'd been here. I'd witnessed it. I want to go home. I want to go home right now. Damian studied me, his expression unreadable. I'm afraid that's not possible. What? Fear spiked through the shock. You said 3 hours. You said I'd be returned safely. That was before this. Before you became a witness to a murder, Miss Petrov. Before you became a liability.
The room spun. I won't say anything, I swear. I don't even know what this was about, not really. I'll forget everything. Will you? He moved closer, and I found myself backing up until I hit the wall. He stopped a foot away, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his eyes. Can you forget the faces of 3 dead men? Can you forget my name, this place, what you heard tonight? If the FBI comes to your door asking questions, will you lie to them? Yes. The word came out desperate. Yes, I will. I have to. If I talk, I'm dead anyway, right? So I'll keep my mouth shut and go back to my life, and we can pretend this never happened." Something flickered in his expression, almost like respect. "You're smarter than I expected." "Then let me go." "I can't." He said it simply, without apology. "Too much at stake. Too many variables I can't control. But I can offer you an alternative." "What alternative?" "Work for me." I stared at him, certain I'd misheard. "What?" "Work for me," he repeated. 3 months, as my personal translator. I have business in Milan, Moscow, New York. I need someone I can trust to translate not just words, but context, nuance, subtext. Someone intelligent enough to understand what's really being said. "You don't trust me. You just said I'm a liability." "Right now, you are. But if you work for me, if you're inside my organization, I can control the situation. I can ensure your safety and your silence. By keeping me prisoner? By giving you a choice." His eyes held mine. 3 months, Miss Petrov. I'll pay you $200,000 deposited into any account you specify. You'll travel, see parts of the world most people only dream of, and when it's over, you'll walk away with enough money to start over anywhere you choose. $200,000? More money than I'd earn in 5 years of freelance translation. Enough to leave New York, maybe go back to school, build the life I'd always wanted but couldn't afford. And if I refuse? His expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Then you leave here tonight, and I hope for both our sakes that you can live with what you've seen. That you never slip up, never make a mistake, never give the authorities any reason to come asking questions. Because if they do—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. I looked at the bodies on the floor, at the blood slowly spreading across expensive hardwood, at the man in sunglasses standing by the door, watching our conversation with professional detachment, at Damian Volkov, this beautiful, dangerous man who held my life in his hands and was offering me a devil's bargain. I thought about my tiny apartment in Brooklyn, my overdue rent, my student loans, my dead-end existence translating instruction manuals and business contracts for people who barely saw me as human. I thought about how close I'd come to dying tonight, how easily one of those bullets could have found me instead. And I thought about $200,000, freedom, purchased with 3 months of my life. I wanted in writing, a contract, specifying exactly what you're asking me to do, how long and how much, and I want half up front. A slow smile spread across Damian's face, transforming him from dangerous to devastating. "Done. Welcome to my organization, Miss Petrov." He extended his hand. I stared at it for a long moment, this final point of no return. Then I shook it, his grip firm and warm, sealing my fate. "One more thing," I said, finding some core of courage I didn't know I possessed. "My name is Lena. If I'm going to work for you for 3 months, you might as well use it." "Lena," he said it slowly, testing the syllables, and the way my name sounded in his accent made something flutter in my stomach that I absolutely did not want to examine. "Lena, I'm Damian, though I suspect you already knew that." I didn't, actually, until tonight. "Good. That means I've been careful." He released my hand, stepped back. "Come, we'll go to my office and formalize the agreement, then I'll have someone take you home to pack." "Pack?" "We leave for Milan tomorrow evening. I hope you have a valid passport." And just like that, my life as I knew it ended. The next 18 hours passed in a blur of surreal efficiency. Damian's office was in a Manhattan high-rise, the kind of anonymous corporate building that could house anything from law firms to hedge funds. His suite occupied the entire 42nd floor,
and it was as elegant and cold as the man himself. Glass, steel, expensive art on the walls that I tried very hard not to think about how he had acquired. The contract was drawn up by a lawyer who appeared within an hour, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who treated the whole thing like any other business agreement. I read every word twice, then had her explain the clauses I didn't understand. The terms were clear. 3 months, starting immediately. I would serve as Damian's personal translator for all business meetings, phone calls, and correspondence requiring Russian or Italian. I would travel with him as needed, with reasonable accommodations provided. I would maintain absolute confidentiality regarding everything I saw, heard, or learned during my employment in perpetuity. In exchange, $100,000 transferred to my account immediately, with the remaining $100,000 paid upon successful completion of the 3-month term, plus expenses, which the contract specified as housing, meals, travel, and appropriate wardrobe. Wardrobe, because apparently my Brooklyn thrift store chic wasn't going to cut it in Damian Volkov's world. I signed. The lawyer witnessed it. And then I watched as Damian transferred $100,000 into my checking account with a few taps on his phone, as casually as someone else might order coffee. "Your building has poor security," he said as his driver, the same man in sunglasses, whose name I learned was Victor, drove me back to Brooklyn. "You'll stay there tonight to pack, but someone will be watching. Don't try to run, Lena. It would be disappointing." Disappointing. Not dangerous or fatal, just disappointing. Somehow that was more unsettling. I packed in a daze. 3 months of clothes, toiletries, my laptop, the few pieces of jewelry my mother had left me before she died. My passport, which thankfully was still valid for another 2 years. I looked around my apartment, at this small space that had been my entire world, and wondered if I'd ever see it again. My phone rang. My best friend Sophie probably wondering why I'd canceled our brunch plans. "Hey," I answered, trying to sound normal. "Where have you been? I've been texting you all morning." "Sorry, work emergency. Listen, I need to tell you something." I took a breath. "I got offered a contract job. 3 months, Europe, really good pay. I'm leaving tomorrow." Silence. Then, "Are you kidding me? That's amazing. Who's the client?" "Can't say. Confidentiality agreement. At least that part was true. But it's legitimate, I promise." "Lena, this is so unlike you. Are you sure?" "I'm sure." I cut her off gently. "It's a good opportunity. I need to do this." We talked for a few more minutes, her excitement filling the spaces where my fear should have been. When I hung up, I felt the weight of the lie settle over me like a shroud. That night, I barely slept. Every sound made me jump, every shadow seemed to hide threats. But morning came without incident, and at precisely 4 p.m., Victor appeared at my door to collect my luggage. "The boss says to dress nice," he said in heavily accented English. "We're flying private." Private. Of course we were. I changed into the most professional thing I owned, black slacks, a cream silk blouse, low heels, and followed Victor to the SUV. The drive to Teterboro Airport took 40 minutes. We pulled directly onto the tarmac where a sleek white private jet waited, stairs extended. Damian stood at the base of those stairs, looking impossibly elegant in dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. He smiled when he saw me, a slight upturn of his lips that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Ready?" he asked. "No." "Yes." "Good. Welcome to your new life, Lena Petrov." I climbed the stairs, stepped into the aircraft's luxurious interior, and felt the door seal shut behind me with a finality that echoed in my chest. There was no going back now. The flight to Milan took 8 hours. The jet's interior was all cream leather and polished wood, with seats that reclined into beds, a full bar, and a level of comfort I'd only seen in movies. Damian had disappeared into a private cabin at the rear, leaving me with Victor and another bodyguard, a younger man named Alexei, who at least smiled occasionally. I tried to sleep but couldn't. My mind spun with questions, fears, the image of 3 dead men that wouldn't leave my thoughts. Eventually, I gave up and pulled out my laptop, intending to distract myself with work. No electronics during business travel. I jumped. Damian had emerged from his cabin, looking annoyingly well-rested. He gestured to my laptop. Security protocol. When we're traveling, when we're working, no personal devices that could be tracked or hacked. Then how am I supposed to? He handed me a phone, sleek and black. This is yours now. Encrypted, untraceable. My number is programmed in. Use this for everything. I stared at it, this physical symbol of how completely my life had changed. Can I at least tell people I'm okay? Your friend Sophie has already received a text from your regular phone, which we're monitoring. She thinks you're having a wonderful time in Milan and will be out of touch for a few days while you get settled. Anger flared. You went through my phone? I told you, security. You're in my world now, Lena. That means I need to know everything about you. Who your friends are, who might come looking for you, who could be compromised. I'm not some criminal. I'm a translator who got dragged into your mess. And yet, here you are, on a private jet to Milan with $100,000 in your bank account. Still feel dragged? I wanted to argue, to maintain my moral high ground, but he was right. I could have refused, could have taken my chances with the FBI, with his threats. Instead, I'd taken the money and the contract and convinced myself I had no choice. Maybe I was more compromised than I wanted to admit. Tell me about Milan, I said, changing the subject. What should I expect? Damian leaned back, relaxed but alert, like a cat at rest that could spring into action at any moment. We're meeting with the Rossi family. They control most of the art smuggling routes through northern Italy. I'm negotiating for access to transport goods from Eastern Europe through their channels. Art smuggling. I repeated, so the business we discussed last night is only one part of my operation. I deal in many things, Lena. Art, antiquities, certain pharmaceuticals, whatever moves from east to west and requires discretion. You mean drugs, stolen goods. I mean commodities that people want but governments restrict. His expression didn't change. I'm not going to pretend to be something I'm not. You know what I am now. But know this too. I don't deal in weapons, I don't traffic humans, and I don't hurt anyone who doesn't deserve it. There are rules, even in my world. Rules like shooting people who pull guns at meetings? Exactly like that. Francesco knew the consequences when he drew that weapon. He chose to break the rules, and he paid the price. I should have been horrified, should have been planning how to escape at the first opportunity. Instead, I found myself asking, why did he do it? Pull the gun. Rossini's nephew thought he should inherit more power than his uncle was willing to give him, thought killing me would make him a legend. Damian's smile was cold. It made him a corpse instead. The cabin fell silent except for the drone of the engines. I turned to look out the window at the darkness below. Lights from ships scattered across the Atlantic like fallen stars. Get some rest, Damian said, standing. We land in 4 hours, and you'll need to be sharp. The Rossis are traditional. They won't like having a woman at the table, especially one translating their words. You'll need to prove yourself immediately. How? By being better than they expect, by understanding not just what they say, but what they mean, by making me look good. He paused at the entrance to his cabin. And Lena, don't make me regret choosing you. He disappeared before I could respond, leaving me alone with the bodyguards and my thoughts. I must have dozed eventually because Victor woke me as we began our descent into Milan. The city spread below us, a carpet of lights against the pre-dawn darkness, the Alps rising in the distance like sleeping giants. We landed at a private terminal, bypassing customs entirely. More men in dark suits, more SUVs with tinted windows. The Italian air was warmer than New York's October chill, carrying scents of coffee and diesel, and something floral I couldn't identify. The drive took us through Milan's streets, still quiet at this early hour, past elegant buildings and shuttered shops, until we arrived at a hotel that looked like a converted palazzo. Gold leaf and marble, doorman and livery, the kind of place where rooms probably cost thousands per night. "You have 3 hours," Damian said as we entered the lobby. "Rest, shower, eat. Someone will bring appropriate clothes. We meet the Rossis at noon." My room was a suite, larger than my entire Brooklyn apartment, with antique furniture and a bathroom done in marble and gold. A rack of clothes appeared within minutes, delivered by a woman who didn't speak or make eye contact. Dresses, slacks, blouses, all in my exact size. Professional, but elegant. The kind of wardrobe I could never have afforded. I showered, the hot water washing away the grime of travel, but not the anxiety gnawing in my stomach. When I emerged, a tray of breakfast waited. Fresh fruit, pastries that smelled like heaven, espresso so strong it could wake the dead. I ate mechanically, staring at my reflection in the ornate mirror across from the bed. Who was this woman in expensive hotel room, wearing designer clothes, working for the Mafia? 3 months, I told myself. Just 3 months, then I'm free. But even then, I suspected it was a lie. The meeting with the Rossi family took place in a private room at a restaurant in the Brera district, all dark wood and dim lighting, and the smell of wine and garlic. 5 men waited when we arrived. The patriarch, Antonio Rossi, in his 70s with white hair and eyes like chips of obsidian, his sons Marco and Giovanni, and 2 others who were introduced, but whose names I immediately forgot because I was too focused on not showing my fear. They looked at me like I was an insect, a curiosity, something they couldn't quite categorize and therefore didn't trust. Damian, to his credit, didn't apologize for my presence or make excuses. He simply introduced me as his translator and sat at the head of the table as if he owned it, forcing the Rossis to adjust around him. The conversation started in Italian, formal and polite, pleasantries about weather and wine and mutual acquaintances. I translated for Damian, who spoke perfect Italian, but wanted to hear the nuances I might catch that he'd miss. And I did catch things. The way Antonio's voice tightened when discussing territory. The sideways glance Marco gave his brother when Giovanni mentioned costs. The subtle emphasis on certain words that suggested suspicion, wariness, a test. I translated not just words, but tone, adding quiet observations when Damian asked questions with his eyes. And slowly, I saw the Rossi's expressions shift. They'd expected a trophy, a prop. They were getting a professional. "She's good," Antonio said in Italian, speaking about me as if I wasn't there. "Where did you find her?" Damian smiled. "I find all my best assets when I'm not looking for them." The double meaning wasn't lost on anyone. The meeting lasted 3 hours, moving from pleasantries to business to the hard negotiation. Numbers, percentages, guarantees. Routes through the Alps, through Trieste, through Venice, art pieces that needed to disappear from one country and reappear in another with clean provenance. I translated everything, my voice steady, even as my mind reeled at the scope of what they were discussing. Millions of dollars in stolen art, bribes to customs officials, partnerships with people whose names I recognized from Interpol's most wanted lists that I'd seen in news articles. I was complicit. Now. Completely. Irrevocably. As the meeting wrapped up, Antonio raised his wine glass. To new partnerships, and to beautiful women who know how to keep secrets. His eyes met mine, and I saw the threat beneath the compliment. I raised my own glass, held his gaze, and replied in flawless Italian, "2 secrets that are worth keeping." Damian's hand found the small of my back, a gesture that looked possessive to the Rossis, but felt almost protective. "Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure," he said. "My people will send the contracts by morning." We left, walking through the restaurant to the waiting SUV, Damian's hand never leaving my back. Once we were inside, the privacy screen up, he turned to me. "You were perfect." The compliment shouldn't have warmed me the way it did. I just did my job. No, you did more than translate. You understood the subtext, the power dynamics. You made me look like I chose the best translator in the world, which makes them respect me more. He studied me. Where did you learn to read people like that?
My father was a diplomat, I said, the memory bittersweet. Soviet Union, before it fell. We moved every few years. Different countries, different languages. You learn to watch people, to understand what they're not saying. It's survival. Your father was Russian? Ukrainian. But we left when I was 12, after everything collapsed. Came to America, started over. I looked out the window at Milan passing by. He died when I was 20, heart attack. My mother followed 2 years later, cancer. I'm sorry. And surprisingly, he sounded like he meant it. It was a long time ago. I turned back to him. What about you? How does someone become what you are? His expression shuddered. That's a conversation for another time. Right now, you should rest. We have dinner with the Rossis tonight, and tomorrow we fly to Moscow. Moscow? My stomach dropped. I thought we were staying in Milan for a few days. Plans change. I need to meet with my partners in Russia, finalize the other end of this arrangement. He saw my expression. What's wrong? Nothing. I haven't been back since I was a child. Afraid of ghosts? Aren't you? Something flickered in his eyes. Gone before I could identify it. Every day.
Moscow in late October was exactly as I remembered. Gray skies, bitter wind, the kind of cold that seeped into your bones and wouldn't let go. We landed at Vnukovo Airport, another private terminal, another fleet of SUVs. But this time, the atmosphere was different. In Milan, Damian had been a visitor, respectful but firm. Here, he was something else. People deferred to him immediately, spoke to him with a mixture of respect and fear that made me realize just how powerful he actually was. The hotel was the Ritz-Carlton, our suite occupying the entire top floor with views of the Moscow River and the Kremlin glowing in the distance. My room was connected to Damian's by a shared living area, luxury wrapped in surveillance. Rest, he said again, that recurring command. We meet my partners at 8. But I couldn't rest. I stood at the window, looking out at the city my parents had fled, feeling the weight of history and bad decisions pressing down on me. A knock on my door. I opened it to find Damian standing there, having changed from his travel clothes into dark slacks and a sweater that made his gray eyes look almost silver. Can't sleep? He asked. Too much on my mind. Walk with me. It wasn't a question. He led me out of the suite, down to the lobby, and outside into the cold evening air. Victor and another bodyguard followed at a discreet distance. We walked along the river, the city alive around us, with people heading home from work, tourists taking photos, street vendors selling roasted chestnuts. You're quiet, Damian said after a few minutes. I'm thinking about how I got here, how fast everything changed. Regrets already? I considered lying, then decided against it. I don't know yet. Ask me in 3 months. He smiled slightly. Honest, I appreciate that. He stopped, turning to face the river. This city made me who I am, not just the criminal parts, everything. I waited, sensing he wanted to say more. My father was a professor, history and literature. My mother was a pianist. We lived in a small apartment near Gorky Park, all 3 of us in 2 rooms, but we were happy. His voice was distant, lost in memory. Then the Soviet Union fell and everything collapsed. My father couldn't find work. My mother got sick, needed medicine we couldn't afford. I was 14 when she died. 16 when my father drank himself to death. I'm sorry, I said quietly. Don't be. It taught me that the world doesn't care about your education or your talent or your goodness. It cares about power and money. So I learned to acquire both. He looked at me. I started running errands for the Bratva. Small things at first. Delivering messages, keeping watch. I was smart. I learned languages and I understood how to read people. By the time I was 25, I was brokering deals between Russian and Italian families. By 30, I had my own organization. And now you're here, at the top. At the top, he agreed, with enemies on every side, and the constant knowledge that one mistake, one betrayal, one moment of weakness could end everything. His eyes met mine. This is a lonely place, Lena, but it's the only place I know how to be. I understood then, in a way I hadn't before. We were both orphans, both displaced, both trying to survive in a world that had taken everything from us. The difference was that he'd chosen power as his armor, and I'd chosen invisibility. The meeting tonight. What should I expect? Danger. He said it simply. The men we're meeting are old guard Bratva. They don't trust easily, and they see me as competition. You'll need to be careful, observant. If you notice anything off, anything that feels wrong, you tell me immediately. What if they don't want me there? Then they will have to adjust. You're mine now, Lena. Under my protection. No one touches you without going through me. The possessiveness in his words should have frightened me. Instead, it sent a different kind of shiver through my body, one I absolutely refused to examine. We walked back to the hotel in silence, the temperature dropping as evening became night. In the lobby, Damian touched my arm. Wear the black dress, the one with long sleeves, and this. He handed me a small box. Inside was a necklace, platinum chain with a single diamond pendant. Simple, but unmistakably expensive. I can't accept this. It's not a gift, it's costuming. Tonight, you're not just my translator, you're my associate, someone who belongs at my side. The necklace tells them you're under my protection. Wear it. I looked at the diamond, at this man who spoke about protection and possession in the same breath, and nodded. The meeting took place in a private residence in Rubliova, Moscow's equivalent of Beverly Hills. The house was massive, modern, despite its traditional facade, with security that made Victor look relaxed. We were escorted through marble halls to a study lined with books, where 5 men waited. They were older than Damian, harder, with the kind of scars that told stories no one wanted to hear. The one who stood to greet us had gray hair and cold blue eyes that assessed me like a predator sizing up prey. Volkov, he said in Russian. You bring a woman to business? I bring a translator, Damian replied calmly. Miss Petrov is fluent in Russian and Italian. She facilitates communication. We all speak Russian here. But not all of us trust it. Damian sat without being invited, and I followed his lead. Miss Petrov ensures no misunderstandings. I'm sure you appreciate the value of clarity in our agreements, Mikhail. Mikhail Sokolov, I realized with a jolt. One of the most powerful Bratva bosses in Moscow, with connections that reached into the Kremlin itself. Sokolov studied me for a long moment, then said something in rapid Russian dialect that I almost didn't catch. A test. I translated smoothly into standard Russian, then into English for Damian, adding quietly, he's testing whether I actually speak Russian or just memorized phrases. Damian smiled. Satisfied, Mikhail? Sokolov grunted and sat. Let's talk business. The conversation was brutal in its efficiency. Roots, percentages, guarantees. Sokolov wanted access to Damian's Western connections. Damian wanted protection in Moscow for his operations. They circled each other verbally like wolves, neither willing to show weakness. I translated everything, but I also watched. Watched the way one of Sokolov's men kept his hand near his jacket. Watched how another man's eyes kept darting to the door, nervous. Watched Sokolov himself, the micro-expressions that betrayed his thoughts before his words did. Something was wrong. I leaned slightly toward Damian, my voice barely audible. The man on the left is signaling someone. His expression didn't change, but his hand moved to his phone under the table, a quick text, likely to Victor waiting outside. The meeting continued for another 20 minutes, agreements sketched out, details to be finalized later. As we stood to leave, Sokolov raised a glass of vodka. "Two partnerships," he said in Russian. "Two partnerships," Damian echoed. We drank. The vodka burned down my throat, sharp and clean. As we moved toward the door, the man I'd noticed earlier shifted his position, blocking our path subtly. My heart rate spiked. "Damian," I said quietly. He saw it too. In one fluid motion, he pushed me behind him, his other hand inside his jacket. Victor burst through the door with two other men, weapons drawn. The room froze. "There's been a misunderstanding," Sokolov said calmly, too calmly. "Yuri, move aside." Yusei hesitated, then stepped away. "My apologies," Sokolov continued. "Yuri is protective, too protective sometimes." "Indeed." Damian's voice was ice. "Perhaps next time we meet somewhere more neutral, for everyone's comfort." We left without another word, Victor and his men forming a protective barrier as we moved to the car. Once inside, doors locked, Damian turned to me. "You noticed Yuri before I did." "He was obvious, once you knew what to look for." "Most people wouldn't have looked." His eyes studied me with new intensity. "You have good instincts, Lena. Better than good." The drive back to the hotel was tense, everyone on high alert. When we finally reached our suite, Damian poured 2 glasses of vodka and handed me one. "Drink." I did, grateful for the burn that distracted from the adrenaline still coursing through my being. "That could have gone very badly," I said. "But it didn't, because you were paying attention."
He set down his glass. Sokolov was testing me, seeing if I'd bring someone valuable to a potential trap. If you'd been a typical translator, oblivious and scared, he would have known I'm weak, but you proved I surround myself with competent people. "I'm not part of your world," I said. "I'm just someone who got dragged into it." "Are you?" He moved closer, and suddenly the space between us felt charged. "Because from where I'm standing, you're adapting remarkably well. You noticed threats, you translated nuances, you made me look powerful in front of men who would kill me if they sensed weakness. That's not someone who's just surviving, Lena. That's someone who's starting to thrive. I don't want to thrive in this world." "Don't you?" His hand came up, fingers brushing my cheek. "Then why are you still here? You have $100,000. You could run tonight, disappear, take your chances. You'd find me. Maybe, or maybe I'd let you go." His thumb traced my lower lip, the touch sending electricity through my entire body. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that somewhere in the past 3 days, you stopped being just a translator to me, and I think I stopped being just an employer to you." His other hand cupped my face, tilting it up to meet his gaze. "Tell me I'm wrong." I couldn't, because he wasn't wrong. Despite everything, the violence, the criminality, the absolute insanity of this situation, I was drawn to him in a way that defied logic and self-preservation. "This is a terrible idea," I whispered. "The worst," he agreed. And then he kissed me. It wasn't gentle. It was fierce, demanding, months of tension compressed into a single moment. His hands tangled in my hair, pulled me closer, and I responded with equal hunger, all my resistance crumbling like sand. When we finally broke apart,
Both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. This complicates things. Understatement. We should stop. Maintain professional boundaries. We should. Neither of us moved. Lena. My name was a question, a plea, a warning all at once. I made my choice. 3 months, that was the deal. What happens during those 3 months is between us. And after? I walk away, and you let me. Something flickered in his eyes, pain maybe, or resignation. Agreed. He kissed me again, slower this time, and I let myself fall into it, into him, knowing that I was making a mistake that would change everything. But for the first time in years, I felt alive. Terrifyingly, dangerously, completely alive. The next 6 weeks passed in a blur of cities and meetings, of danger and desire, of a double life that became harder to distinguish from reality. We traveled to Rome, to Vienna, to Prague. In each city, I translated, observed, became indispensable. Damian introduced me not as his translator, but as his associate, and slowly, the men we dealt with began to treat me with respect instead of dismissal. And at night, behind closed doors, we fell into each other with a desperation that spoke to how temporary this all was. We never spoke about feelings, never made plans beyond the next city, but his hand found mine in quiet moments, and his eyes followed me across crowded rooms, and I knew this was becoming something neither of us had intended. "You're good at this," Damian said one evening in Prague as we walked along the Charles Bridge after a particularly tense meeting with Czech smugglers. "Better than you should be." Is that a compliment or an accusation? An observation. You've stopped flinching when people mention crimes. You negotiate like you've been doing this for years. You're becoming one of us. I stopped walking, the weight of his words hitting me. I'm not one of you. Aren't you? You facilitated dozens of illegal deals. You've lied to authorities in 3 countries. You've helped me move millions of dollars in stolen goods. He turned to face me. What makes you different from me anymore? I have a choice. When this is over, I can walk away. Can you? Or will you always carry this with you, the knowledge of what you've done, who you've become? I wanted to argue, to maintain the fiction that I was still the same person who'd gotten that phone call at 3 a.m., but he was right. I'd changed. I'd adapted to his world so completely that sometimes I forgot I'd ever lived any other way. 2 more weeks, I said quietly. Then I'm done. 2 more weeks, he echoed, but his expression suggested he didn't believe it any more than I did. We returned to Moscow 5 days later for a final meeting with Sokolov, this time on neutral ground, at a restaurant Damian owned. The meeting was tense but productive, agreements finalized, hands shaken, alliances formed. As we left, Sokolov pulled me aside. "You're wasted on translation," he said in Russian. "If you ever tire of Volkov, I could use someone with your skills." "Thank you, but I'm not interested in long-term employment." He smiled, showing gold teeth. "Everyone says that, until they realize they have nowhere else to go." His words haunted me on the flight back to Milan, where we'd complete the final transfer with the Rossi family. Because he was right. What did I have to go back to? A tiny apartment, a dead-end career, a life of safe insignificance? With Damian, I had danger and passion and purpose. With Damian, I mattered. But at what cost? The final meeting with the Rossi family was a celebration. The routes were established, the first shipments had moved successfully, and millions of dollars had been made by all parties. Antonio Rossi hosted us at his villa outside Milan, a sprawling estate with vineyards and gardens and art that belonged in museums. "To successful partnerships," Antonio toasted in Italian, raising his glass, and to the beautiful signorina who made it all possible. I translated for Damian, who smiled and raised his own glass, to Lena, who proved to be far more valuable than I anticipated. The words should have felt like a compliment. Instead, they felt like a cage closing. After dinner, as the men smoked cigars and discussed future opportunities, I excused myself to walk in the gardens. The evening was warm, the scent of jasmine heavy in the air, the lights of Milan twinkling in the distance. Running away? I turned to find Damian standing behind me, his jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up. In the moonlight, he looked younger, less dangerous, almost vulnerable. Just needed the air. Liar. He moved closer. You're thinking about leaving, about the fact that tomorrow your 3 months are up and you're free to go. That was the deal. Deals can be renegotiated. My heart stuttered. What are you saying? I'm saying stay, not as my translator, as my associate. Equal share in the business, equal say in decisions. You've proven yourself 100 times over. I trust you, Lena. I trust you more than I've ever trusted anyone. The offer was tempting. Power, wealth, purpose, and him. God, him. And if I say no? Pain flickered across his face. Then I keep my word. You walk away. I transferred the final 100,000, and you never hear from me again. You'd really let me go? I don't want to, but I will. Because keeping you here against your will would destroy the one thing between us that's real. He cupped my face, his touch achingly gentle. I love you, Lena. I didn't mean to. I tried not to. But somewhere between Milan and Moscow, you became the only thing in my world that matters more than power or money or survival. Tears stung my eyes. This is insane. I know. We barely know each other. I know you better than I've known anyone. I know you're brave and brilliant and far stronger than you believe. I know you sing old Russian folk songs in the shower. I know you take your coffee black because your father did. I know you have nightmares about losing everyone you love, which is why you keep people at a distance. His thumb brushed away a tear that had escaped. And I know that you love me too, even though you're terrified to admit it. I can't do this. I can't be part of your world. The violence, the criminality, the constant danger. Then I'll leave it. All of it. He stared at me. What? I'll leave it. All of it. His voice was fierce, desperate. I have enough money to disappear, to start over somewhere clean. We could go anywhere, live any life you want. Just don't walk away from this, from us. You'd really give up everything? Your empire, your power, your identity? For you, yes. Because none of it means anything without you. He kissed me, soft and slow. Because none of it means anything without you. I wanted to believe him, wanted to say yes, to choose love over safety, passion over predictability, but I'd spent my whole life watching people make reckless choices and paid terrible prices. I need time to think, to figure out if this is real or just Stockholm Syndrome or some twisted trauma bond. He flinched, but nodded. How much time? I don't know. A month? 2? I need to go back to my life, remember who I was before you. If I still feel this way, if you still feel this way, then we'll talk. And if I can't wait that long, if something happens and you disappear and I never find you again, then it wasn't meant to be. He held me a long time there in the garden, with the jasmine and the moonlight, neither of us willing to be the first to let go. Finally, he pulled back. Tomorrow, I'll take you to the airport. You'll fly home, and I'll wait for as long as it takes.
The flight back to New York was commercial, economy class, a jarring return to reality after weeks of private jets and five-star hotels. I sat by the window, watching Europe disappear below me, feeling like I was leaving part of myself behind. The final 100,000 had appeared in my account that morning, along with a text from the encrypted phone. Be safe. Be happy. Know that I'm here if you need me. I'd left the phone in the hotel room, severing the last connection. My apartment felt foreign, too small and shabby after palazzo suites and luxury penthouses. Sophie had filled my fridge with basics and left a note. Welcome home. Call me when you're settled. Can't wait to hear about Europe. But how could I tell her about Europe? How could I explain where I'd been, what I'd done, who I'd become? I threw myself into work, taking every translation job I could find, trying to lose myself in the familiar routine. But everything felt hollow, meaningless. I'd translated conversations that moved millions of dollars, that toppled governments, that shaped the criminal underworld. Now I was back to translating user manuals and business contracts, and it felt like suffocating. Weeks passed, then a month. I told myself I'd made the right choice, that I'd escaped while I still could. But at night, I dreamed of gray eyes and dangerous smiles and hands that knew exactly how to touch me. 2 months after leaving Milan, my doorbell rang at 2 a.m. I knew, somehow, even before I looked through the peephole, knew who would be standing there, who would have traveled across an ocean to find me. I opened the door. Damian looked exhausted, his expensive clothes rumpled, dark circles under his eyes. But when he saw me, his face transformed with relief so profound it hurt to witness. I waited, he said hoarsely, like I promised. But I need to know, Lena. I need to know if there's still a chance for us, or if I should let you go forever. I should have sent him away, should have chosen safety and normalcy, and the life I'd planned before he shattered it. Instead, I grabbed his shirt and pulled him inside, kicked the door shut, and kissed him with 2 months of longing and desperation and love I'd been trying so hard to deny. I missed you, I whispered against his lips. God, I missed you so much. I left, he said between kisses. The business, the empire, all of it. I made deals to hand everything over to my lieutenants. I'm out, Lena. Clean. Free. You're lying. I'm not. He pulled out his phone, showed me documents, transfer agreements, bank accounts frozen and liquidated. I told you I'd give it all up for you. I meant it. Why? Why would you do that? Because I love you more than I love power. Because, for the first time in my life, I want to build something instead of destroy. Because you made me believe I could be someone other than the monster I became. His hands framed my face. Stay with me, not in my world, but in ours. Whatever that looks like, wherever that takes us, just stay. I looked into his eyes, at this man who had been my captor and my salvation, my corruption and my redemption, and I made my choice. Okay. Yes, I'm staying. Relief and joy and love flooded his expression. He kissed me again, and this time it felt like coming home, like finding something I hadn't known I'd been searching for my entire life. We didn't have all the answers, didn't know how to build a life for the wreckage of our pasts, but as Damian held me in my tiny Brooklyn apartment, as dawn broke over the city outside, I knew that whatever came next, we'd face it together. 3 months had changed everything, had taken Lena Petrov, the invisible translator, into someone brave enough to choose love over fear, passion over safety, possibility over predictability. And somewhere in the darkness, in the space between who I'd been and who I was becoming, I found peace.
6 months later, the gallery opening in Barcelona was crowded with collectors and critics.
all there to view the collection of recovered art pieces that had been anonymously donated to the museum. I stood in front of a Caravaggio, a stunning piece depicting Judith beheading Holofernes, and smiled slightly. "Admiring your handiwork?" Damian asked, appearing at my elbow with 2 glasses of champagne. "Our handiwork," I corrected. "You negotiated the returns. I handled the documentation." After leaving his criminal empire, Damian had done something unexpected. He'd begun returning the art he'd stolen or acquired illegally, working with a network of lawyers and international organizations to restore pieces to their rightful owners or donate them to museums. It was his penance, his way of balancing the scales. And I'd helped him, using my authentication skills for good instead of fraud. It didn't erase what we'd done, but it was a start. "Do you regret it?" he asked quietly. "Giving up the excitement, the danger?" I looked at him, at this man who dismantled his entire life to build something new with me. We lived modestly now, in a small apartment in Barcelona, working as legitimate art consultants. We had enough money to be comfortable, but not excessive. We had peace, mostly, though sometimes his past found us, and we had to move, to adapt, to survive. But we had each other, and that was enough. "No regrets," I said, taking his hand. "Not a single one." He smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his face, and kissed me there in the gallery, surrounded by beauty we'd helped rescue from the darkness. We weren't perfect. We weren't even entirely legal, given what we knew and what we'd done, but we were free from the violence, from the empire, from the cages we'd built around ourselves. And in the end, that was the greatest translation of all, turning captivity into freedom, darkness into light, a devil's bargain into something that looked remarkably like love. The end.